it's Doris with all the books, and I have an August wrap up for you. I read 20 books in August. I'm pretty happy about that. I even stayed up past my bedtime to finish the last one on August 31st, so go me, yeah. The first one I finished was the one that I started a long time ago. So, no, I started this at the beginning of the month for Eric and Anna's book club, and I then just kept putting it aside for readathons. So I finally finished it, and it was pretty good. This is a really interesting premise. There's 3 sections. The first, and they repeat, so every 3rd chapter is the section repeated. But the initial section is the turn of the century, and I realize that I have got to quit saying the turn of the century, but I just assume people look at me and know which turn of the century I'm talking about. In 1901, this begins, and it's a group of Jews that are trying to make it to the United States. They're trying to immigrate to the U.S., and for some reason they end up in Ireland unbeknownst to them. So there's that section. And the second section is an old gentleman, and kind of it's set in closer to current times, and it's kind of in an old folks home, but not really, because there's another guy who's a mute, a young man who's also there. So it's just an assisted living environment, kind of Catholic. I believe they're nuns running it. And then the third section is definitely modern times, and it's set in London and partially in Ireland, and it is a young couple who are thinking about getting engaged, but the guy is Jewish and the girl is Catholic Irish, and he wants her to convert. So it's very interesting to read and watch how the storylines converge eventually. This is out of character for me, but the historical fiction part, I didn't connect with those characters, which normally that's what I love, is the historical fiction. But I really liked the little old man and the mute boy, the second section, and I found the current section, which is contemporary, is what I usually am not interested in, but I was really interested in the girl's struggles with what to do, and the cultural environment of the 2 religions and the conflict there. So yeah, it was a very interesting read, and I need to watch the review video now that I've read it, and you know, that's my reward, of course. And then the reason that I was able to hit 20 books again this month is because I read, looking at my pile, 5 graphic novels, and the 5 that I read were in the second half, so this stack, and that's atypical for me as well. I don't read a lot of graphic novels, but I've started back to work, and I have several middle school kids that, you know, they're limited in English, but, you know, they're older, so they don't want baby work, but they really love graphic novels. So I was trying to initially find them some. They don't like manga for whatever reason, but they like graphic novels. So I had looked at the high school, because I teach there as well, to see if there were any graphic novels there that they might like, and I wanted to read them first because, you know, make sure they're topically okay for middle school. So I found these Boxers and Saints, and this was fascinating. These are set in the Boxer Rebellion, which I knew nothing at all about. I mean, I'd heard the term before, but I didn't know, and apparently I don't remember the years, shame on me, but it's back in history quite a bit with the imperialism and the rebellion against the colonialism and the foreign influences. So they're told from dual perspectives. So this one was a little girl who converted to Christianity, and she sees visions of Joan of Arc. And then this one was a little boy who began to fight for his own gods and cultural perspective, and it was just really neat. And I have to show you. So this one has some of the Chinese gods in it that he sees, and I just thought it was so neat, so fascinating, and the artwork is the style that I really like. I was trying to find you. I should have marked it for you. The gods. Here's a nice one where you can see all the gods in that one, and then this one with. I just thought it was clever the way he did that, introducing other characters, you know, visions. So really enjoyed those, and I actually would like to add these to my personal collection. They're from the high school library, but if I can find them at a nice price one of these days when I have some extra money that I'm not spending on other books. And then I decided the books that they were grabbing and consuming was a series called Amulet. So I thought maybe if I read Amulet, I would know what it was that they liked, or get an idea of what they were liking in the graphic novels. So these definitely were more middle grades, just the feel to them. But once you got to the second half where the world building began, I just thought they were very imaginative, completely just very enjoyable. So yeah, here's some of the robot characters in the world building. So there's 7 of these, and apparently there's an 8th and a 9th coming out eventually. I couldn't find the release date, but the 9th will complete the series. So yeah, if you know of any, I know we have El Defo, I'm trying to get that at the library, but if you know of any graphic novels that are really good for middle grades, let me know, because I'm on the hunt now. So then I also finished The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa. This was just beautiful. It's a tiny little book, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I like books with old people in them, and this one, it was a love story without being a romance, and it was just the sweetest thing. Really, really appreciated it. And it's set in Japan, and it's got that more reserved feel to it. So, I don't know. It's just really, really beautiful. And so it's the older gentleman and then this woman that is hired to be his housekeeper, and how her son, he's about 10, eventually starts hanging out with them as well. And so the dynamic between the three. And there's math. It's a math book. You can see the math symbols. And so that's talked about a lot, different math concepts, but it's in a very conversational tone. And I don't think, like, if you're not a math person, I don't think it takes away from the story. And if you are, it just adds to it a lot. But this is beautiful. I'm probably going to give this 5 stars. I'll put it on my 5-star list because it was just really, really beautiful told story. I loved it. And then I also finished Silas Marner. This was on audiobook. And I read this one. This was my mother's favorite book when she was in high school. She had to read it as a senior, I think. And yeah, the first half of this is by George Elliot, Middlemarch fame. The first half was kind of, I was laughing at myself the other day. All those tropes of the classics era, it is full of those. So the first half kind of bored me. I think in a video I was like blah 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 about it. But the second half, when the little girl is introduced, she is just the most delightful character. So the second half really picked up and became just so sweet and beautiful. Yeah. So Silas Marner. And then I finished another little one. A lot of little ones here. James Baldwin, The Fire Next Time. This is my first James Baldwin, and I picked it up because I had read the essay collection that was just released this past year, The Fire This Time, and I wanted to read the book that it was referring to. And this was very interesting. The first, I thought it would be an essay collection, and it's actually the first essay is a letter to his nephew, and that one was great. I like that a lot. And then the rest of the book, it's not exactly an essay, or if it is, it's a really long essay. I guess it's one long essay, I would say. And it wasn't really what I was expecting. expecting, and it's very esoteric. It was like I'd have to read it again to figure it out and to like take copious notes to get it all. I mean, I did get a lot out of it, and it was very interesting, but it's a book that you have to study. It's not one that you just read and get it. And he's talking a lot about religion, various religions, so Christianity and Islam, and racism, and it's just a different perspective, because a lot of the books that I've read have been about the church, the Christian church, becoming a cultural foundation for the civil rights movement, and, you know, of course, Islam becoming another foundation for the civil rights movement. And one thing I did, so this was different in that he was kind of negative on that in some regards, but he kind of went back and forth, so it was hard to like get where he was going all the time. One thing I did really get from it was the roots of the unrest in the Islamic faith in regards to U.S. culture, you know, with ISIS and all that controversy. I did see some roots of that in here. I don't know. It was just, this is very deep. This is very deep. And I would have to read it again and study it to get it. But yeah, it was very interesting. Now, another one that I did get, and I have more of a science background, so that makes sense. But even if you don't, this one is just written so effectively. The Sixth Extinction by Elizabeth Kolbert. This isn't quite what I was expecting. I mean, it totally is. It's about extinction. It's about the current extinction crisis and how humans are the driving force behind it. But I was expecting this to be a much more depressing read. And I'm not saying that it's not, because we are causing these problems. But the way she handled it was, each chapter she took a different species and focused on it, and they're not all modern species that are going extinct. A lot of these are just using species from the fossil record to explain the concept of extinction and how we as humans historically developed that idea, because we didn't always believe in extinction. And she just hops around and intersperses extinctions from the other turn of the century, like in the 1800s. We got all these turns of the century now in my lifetime, and talks about that. So it's a lot more like history than you would expect from a scientific nonfiction. It's just very interesting all the way through. And the last chapter is called Hope is the Thing with Feathers. So, and I'm not gonna lie, I totally cried in my car listening to it. Yeah, this is a great book. Another 5-star read, and I wouldn't be nervous about it if you're not into scientific focused books. This is written, like, there's some scientific terminology, but it's very much written in layman terms, and there's a lot more of a storyline, so it's not hard at all. This is a great read. And then to finish up the month, I read, this was a reread for me, Persepolis. I read this earlier in the year and totally loved it. And then I read this again because I wanted to be sure that I remembered all of this when I went into Persepolis too. So these and The Housekeeper and the Professor were for Mel's Bookland Adventures, her Women in Translation book club. So, yes, Persepolis is delightful. I enjoyed it even more the second time around. The first time I was really trying to understand the historical timeline, so I was very focused on trying to put that in my mind. So the second time around, I just read it for enjoyment, and the little girl is so delightful. She is just delightfully precocious. This is a charming read and packed with so much information on the Afghanistan and the wars in Iraq. It's the wars in Iraq. I don't know why I said Afghanistan, but it's from my childhood, and we grew up, you know, at the same time. And it's just fascinating to read her perspective. And then Persepolis too is her teen years and young adult years, and it's not quite as charming as this one because those kind of years are a little harder, but it's every bit as good. I would just she ends up having to leave home. Her parents become uncomfortable with her living there and being so outspoken, and they're afraid for her. So they send her to oh, it starts with an A. Anyway, they send her to Europe to live, and the family, it's a family friend, and she ends up living on her own. And it's bad enough, you know, a teenager having to live on her own, but you know, there's also the cultural dynamic. You know, she's the only one like herself there, and it's just great. I mean, it's so much more than a story about Iraq, and it's so much more than a coming of age, and it's so much more than an immigration story. It's all those things. So great series. 5 stars as well. So I think a lot of 5 stars this month. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon. Yay. Bye.